and welcome. I'd like to call to order the meeting of December the 12th, Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority, JPA. We'd like to start with a roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Chair Corrigan?
Here.
Vice Chair Abby Koga? Here. Director Greeley? Here. Alternate Director Yulo?
Here.
Director Smith?
Here.
Director Miller?
Here.
Director Sinks?
Here.
Director Rennie?
Here.
Director Gibbons?
Here.
Alternate Director Flagger?
Here.
Director Craig?
Here.
Thank you. I will note that Alternate Director Fred Tovar representing Gilroy and Director Cortese are absent.
Thank you. It's difficult for us to hear your mic out there, I think, because the audio is all pointing that way. So I don't know if anybody on audio can help change that, but several of us are having a hard time hearing what's going on.
Apologies. I'll do better speaking into the mic.
And we'll work on focusing and reading lips, okay? All right, so this is the time in the agenda for public comment. If any members here from the public wish to make a comment, I'd be happy to entertain that. I ask that you fill out a speaker card and approach the podium so that we have your name and information correctly in the minutes. Hearing none and seeing none, I'm going to move on. The next item is to adopt a resolution commending Directors Craig, Greeley, and Harney for their dedication and service to SVCE. We are certainly sad to see you guys going, but we have a plaque for each one of you, and I want to thank you. I'm not sure what.
Are we going to come up and make like a group picture with everybody in front of the dais?
Can we do that and do that after we have a motion? Yes, thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? No. So what I'd like to suggest is we take a picture now so that those departing directors don't have to sit through the entire meeting if they would not like to be here.
Are you going to read it?
I'd be happy to, but I'm not sure I have a mic out there.
Yes.
I think you're going up there.
Highlights would be good. Can we get a microphone? Can I borrow a copy of one of the highlights? Is this on? Hello? Yes. Hi. Okay, so I'm not going to read every whereas, but what we'd like to make sure you know is that Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority, which was formed in March of 2016, recognizes the valuable contributions of each one of the three of you from your respective cities, and wants to thank you for the important work you've done and the decisions that you helped make possible on behalf of SVCE, and that your award-winning budget, what is this, approved SVCE's award-winning budget for responsible and transparent finances. Who knew how wonderful that is? We are really so thankful to each one of the three of you for the important work you've done to help make sure your city was represented and that SVCE thrives in all of our communities. So I'm going to hand you this back, and I'd love to get a picture with all of you holding that up. All right, thank you. I'd like to, just as we all head back to our seats, invite any one of the three of you, if you'd like to make any final comments, you're welcome to do so. Daniel, you could use the podium and the others can use their mics. How about that? It's on. Marcia, would you like to say anything? Burton? would you like to say anything?
Sure, I just wanted to say it's been an honor and a privilege to work with everybody, and it was great to watch the formation of this agency and to see the important work that it's done, and I know it's going to do even more important and great work in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And Daniel?
Likewise, assuming this is on. Likewise, it's been an honor serving on this board, both as a founding member and as a contributor. One of the things that I most appreciated about this board was it certainly didn't feel like government. It felt like a group of people that came together to make a meaningful difference in our communities. And there's a particular moment that stands out in my mind and my memory as I sat up on the city council in Gilroy. There was a number of members that are here today that came down to Gilroy to petition the city to join this JPA. And I remember being with some of the other council members, and they were asking, why would we join this? And my question to them was, why wouldn't we join it? And consequently, I had about a 2.5-hour long conversation with Mr. Bray over here to get a better understanding before we made the final vote. And sure enough, that vote passed. And it's just been an overwhelming success. And a second thing that really stood out to me was when we had the opportunity to vote whether we should go early and bring everyone in early. And there was, a little bit of a dissension on the board of directors, and we made the decision that if we're going to be a business, we have to act like a business, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity that we have. And we did that, and we got early enrollment for most of our customers. And so as I leave, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to serve, for sharing your experiences with me and helping me, as I was on our city council. And I would encourage you to continue to be aggressive in what you're doing and take those difficult challenges and see them through. So thank you very much, and thanks for everything you guys are doing. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would just like to say to all three of you, even with your departure, which we will definitely miss each one of you, we hope that you'll continue to be an ambassador for SVCE in your communities, given the leadership roles you've already demonstrated in your towns, that I hope you will also consider later in tonight's agenda. We're looking at forming a speakers bureau. These are the kind of ways that we'd love to see you stay engaged with SVCE, and we're always just a phone call or email away. So thank you again for all you've done. I'd also like to take this chance to introduce a new member who's sitting with us tonight, Nisa Flieger, who just got sworn in. Nisa, welcome. You're representing the city of Los Altos, and we're so thrilled you're here.
Thank you, Chair Corrigan. And I just want to highlight that I am actually the alternate for Jeannie Bruins. She will continue to be the representative for the city, but I look forward to being her representative here when she's not available, and I've heard about the wonderful things that this group has done, and so I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Good. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to everyone else as well. So the first item on tonight's agenda is the consent calendar. Is there anything on the consent calendar that needs further discussion? Can I have a motion to approve?
I move consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes.
And the public?
I don't know that the public needs to be checked on the consent calendar, but I'm happy to, if there's anyone here from the public wishing to comment on tonight's consent calendar. All right, moving on. The regular calendar, item number 2, the CEO's report.
Hi, Chair Corrigan, members of the board. Very shortly, I'll have Poonam Agarwal come up to give you an update on the legislative and regulatory issues. We are going to, in the next few months, bring to you some updates to our strategic plan. As you know, we have faced some challenges on the legislative front from last year and also on the regulatory side. So in order to prepare for direct access and a future where our margins will be less than what it was in the past, we've got to make some changes in our policies and our business practices. So this is a heads up that we are working with bouncing some ideas off the Risk Oversight Committee, and also we'll bring it to the Executive Committee and then to the board over the first quarter or so. So with that, I'll invite Poonam to give you an update on regulatory and legislative issues. Hillary is on vacation for this meeting, so Poonam's going to do it.
Thank you, Girish. Good evening. I've met several of you. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet yet, my name is Poonam Agrawal. I joined SVCEA a few months ago, and it's my pleasure to present the legislative and regulatory update on behalf of Hillary Staver. And given this is my first presentation to the board, I hope you'll go easy on the really tough questions. It has been very busy on the legislative and regulatory front. The legislative session has started, as you may know, and SVCEA's lobbyists, recently retained lobbyists, have been working closely with CalCCA's lobbyists to further our legislative priorities, and those are related to data access, transparency, and affordability. Moving over to the regulatory front, direct access, as Girish mentioned, is very much on our minds, on our radar, and we expect CPUC to issue a decision or issue some guidance in the next couple of weeks or early January. The PCIA proceeding continues to be very active. CalCCA filed an application for rehearing of the PCIA Track 1 decision recently, and the application will give the CPUC an opportunity to reconsider the worst aspects of the decision. If the CPUC does not take action, the application will form the basis of a legal challenge in court. Phase 2 has been officially kicked off, and it will run through October 2019. CalCCA filed comments today on the ruling, and the pre-hearing conference is scheduled for next week on Thursday. The Energy Resource and Recovery Account, the ERA, is moving along as well. The highly anticipated proposed decision was issued last week, but not in time for it to be adopted in December. The earliest it will be taken up is at the CPUC voting meeting in January on the 10th. And the earliest the rates could go into effect would be March 1st. And Don Bray will be talking about rates a little bit later in the meeting. Resource adequacy seems to be the most impactful proceeding currently before us. And as you may recall, resource adequacy has two main goals. This commission-administered program firstly focuses on ensuring that the CAISO, the California Independent System Operator, has enough capacity resources to maintain safe and reliable operation of the grid at all times. And second, to provide appropriate incentives for the siting and construction of new resources needed for maintaining reliability in the future. The proposed decision, which was issued on November 11th, is of major concern. It proposes that the IOUs be the central buyer for the other load-serving entities in their service area, with full procurement authority and no limits. The multi-year program will have a 3-year forward duration, and for the first 2 years, the minimum procurement requirement will be 100%, and for the third year, it will be 80%. Again, these are just minimums. There are no penalties for the IOUs if they do not meet the compliance requirements, as long as they show adequate effort. And lastly, the costs of procurement will be paid for through the cost allocation mechanism, the CAM, and the procurement process and costs will be reviewed by the CAM Procurement Review Group, the CAM PRG, which is a small secret group consisting of the Energy Division staff at the CPUC, the IOUs, and non-market participants. The CCAs are open to a non-IOU buyer. However, under the framework that is presented in the proposed decision, the CCAs are forced to bundle their local RA with other attributes and bid it to the central buyer with no guarantees that the bid resources will be accepted. And this places a material portion of a non-utility LSEs the CCA's portfolio out of its control, devalues existing contracts, and thus increases risk and drives the rates higher for its customers. The CCAs are also open to residual procurement, where the CCAs and other LSCs would procure their own local RA. In the event of an overall shortfall, the central buyer would procure RA to meet the gap, the collective gap. However, the PD gives the IOU full procurement authority with no limits on the products, term, or quantities that may be procured, and this encourages over-procurement by the central buyer and all other LSCs, thus further increasing rates. And lastly, the PD's proposal reaches beyond the Commission's jurisdiction into the FERC's wholesale capacity markets and ignores Public Utility Code 380, the requirement that allows the CCAs to determine their own generation resources used to serve their customers. With that, I'll end, and I'm happy to answer any questions, easy or difficult.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, just a comment. I was impressed with the language that CalCCA and the effort CalCCA put into this regulatory filing, and it sounds to me like the IOUs aren't necessarily on board with this either. Can you predict how this might go? It seems like every ruling of the CPUC in the last 2 years has been against us, but perhaps this time with more players on board, they'll change their mind. Do you care to venture a guess on how this might go?
Which aspect of the filing? The central buyer, the procurement, all of it?
Yeah. Well, in particular, the central buyers being the IOUs. Let's try that.
Based on, I'll take a stab at it, and maybe Girish has more comments.
And maybe most important to the fiscal health of CCAs, the unfair liability burden. Do you expect that they might reverse this unfair liability burden that they've placed on us, or potential loss of substantial amounts of money we've invested in RA to date?
Okay. So, looking into my CPUC crystal ball.
Thank you.
Or rather, looking at previous decisions that the CPUC has made and language that they've used, it's most likely that they will continue with the IOUs being the central buyer. They don't see the CAISO as being the entity that could be the central buyer, and in fact, CAISO does not want to be the central buyer. And no other entity has come forward, or there's no other proposal to an alternative to the central buyer being the IOU. So that part I see unlikely to change. And in terms of the liability burden, I think that one, there's no precedence for it. For example, there's no PCIA for customers leaving a CCA and going to an electric service provider. And also, there's no recourse currently for resources or RA procured by the CCA and costs associated with it, in other words. And I will pass it on to Girish to see if he has any other comments.
So I think the central buyer as the buyer of all resource adequacy, I think that is, I'd handicap that as being, that could be reversed, because by having that stand, we have contracts that have been entered into by multiple CCAs, multi-year contracts, at the behest of statements made by the president of the PUC and other members of the PUC. And we responded to those statements by buying resource adequacy for multiple years. So to have that stranded by this decision because they're going to go to central buyer full procurement, I can't see that standing. We also have some new players in, I expect the municipal utilities are not going to like this ruling too, because it changes the market by having 3 large buyers, whereas previously you had bilateral agreements. So that's going to change it too. The secrecy around how this gets done, where we have antiquated rules on confidentiality, where market information is kept secret way beyond any useful time. I don't think that's going to change, because that would require changes in PUC policy for a whole host of other proceedings too. However, that issue is something we are going to bring up. SVCEA is going to bring up in legislation as something to break open to bring more transparency to electricity markets. Our exposure could be in the order of close to $10 million, and that's just us. Most other CCAs are going to be of our size, would be about that amount too. So on the one hand, in the past decisions, just applying what we think is common sense, we thought decisions would be changed, proposed decisions would be changed, and they actually became worse in some cases. I can't see this holding the way the proposed decision is put in place. I'd leave a last point here is there are issues in this which implicate FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission also. So there are new players in this initiative that didn't exist before.
So bottom line for our financials, potential $10 million hole if things stand.
Correct. So $10 million
over the lifespan of the RA that we've purchased.
That's just the immediate potential loss.
Yeah.
And then the inefficiencies of this market could bring additional losses in the market going forward.
Because the market and competition aren't at work.
That's correct.
Because of the central buyer,
yes.
Monopoly buyer. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who'd like to make comment here on this topic? No. All right. Appreciate it.
Good job for your first time.
Thank you.
Well done. And I think we all understood it for the most part. Moving on to item number 3, appoint representatives for vacant seats newly vacated by the departure of Marcia and Burton. That has left both the Audit Committee and the Finance and Administration Committee short one person. Dawn, are you going to make a presentation about this?
You handled pretty well right there.
Okay. I was just going to alert my fellow board members that the CEO has already reached out to Tony and to Tony Nada and to Nancy Smith to take on individual roles. If there's anyone else who'd like to take a role on either of these two committees, we're certainly willing to have an open discussion about that. But if not, we've already got 2 candidates who are willing to take the jobs through February of 2019, at which point the whole committee will have to reelect these and appointments to all our committees. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I'd like to have a motion to appoint the 2 candidates unless there's any other, yes, any other comments?
Just answer the question. Does that solve it?
That,
we don't need 3. We just need those 2 and we're done?
Yes.
we just need those 2 to fill the immediate openings on the
Perfect.
Audit Committee and the Finance Administration Committee.
Perfect.
And that'll be a short-term fill since both of those committees have some immediate work to complete between now and February. Any other comments or questions? Any public comment on this issue? All right, I'm going to bring it back up here for a motion, please.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So just to be clear, who's taking which seats on which committee?
Nancy Smith will take the open and vacated seat on the SVCE Audit Committee that is vacated by Marcia. And Tony, wait, am I mixing it up?
No,
And
you're right.
Tony will take this seat on the Finance and Administration Committee vacated by Burton
Yeah, and,
through February of 2019.
you know, I also asked whether we needed to fill this short gap, and we actually have real critical business, and so we want those committees fully staffed through this short period. So I appreciate you stepping up, Nancy, and Tony, wherever you are. Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. With no further discussion, I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Passes unanimously. All right, now we'll move on to item number 4, the resolution to adopt a SVCE strategic plan. I'm thinking this will be presented by you, Girish, or Amy.
I'll start with just a
Thank
few
you.
words while Amy is setting up and the presentation is being set up. This is the outcome of a lot of work by the board, by the CPAG, the Community Program Advisory Group, many of your staff through the member agency working group, multiple meetings and input from the CNI customers through meetings run by Don Bray and his group. So there's a lot of information to absorb today. We have provided that information in various other meetings, but today it's coming to you as a recommendation. So big picture, I wanted to highlight 3 points. This recommendation is highlighting several sectors of decarbonization: transportation and building electrification, customer engagement and innovation, and power supply. That's point 1. Second point I'd like to make is we are asking you to approve about $6 million in program funding over the next 2 years. You have budgeted or approved a budget of close to $10.4 million for the next 2 years. You've only approved 1 year, but your plan has been 2% per year, so $10 million. So we are asking for about 60% of the total actual and projected budget to be approved today. And the last point is, when you formed the agency, you adopted a strategic plan and you set a goal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the year 2021. If you approve today's plan, you will also be approving a target for 2025 and 2030. At 2025, the goal is to get to 40%, and 2030, 50% below baseline 2015 levels. These are extremely ambitious targets. This can only be achieved through a very strong collaboration with each city represented in our agency and our customers. It's going to require a lot of unprecedented change that we've not really seen before, but that's why you formed us. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Good evening. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present. Okay. Let's see.
If we could pull up the presentation, please. Thank you.
All right, so the presentation is divided into 3 parts. How did we get here? What needs to happen for SVCE to achieve deep decarbonization? And then the third part is the proposed strategy and programs roadmap. So first things first, how we got here. As Girish already outlined, this is the culmination of many months' work. Actually, initial work started back in 2017. As you know, there was a bit of a false start. The CPAG formed, and we've been carrying out a multi-month stakeholder engagement process since that time. And so the last 6 months or so of that process is illustrated in this diagram here. There are several key groups, also as Girish had already mentioned, that have been integral to this process beyond staff and the board. Our member agency working group of staff members, our customer program advisory group, of course, our CNI customers, and then also participants of a broader stakeholder group that was held in September at a facilitated workshop. And actually many of the members of CPAG are in the audience tonight. So however, meanwhile, while we've been carrying out the stakeholder engagement process, as you know, we've had several setbacks, legislative and regulatory setbacks, and those have changed the landscape in which we're operating into one that's much more competitive. Although those are setbacks, SVCE does have the opportunity to really demonstrate its relevance through well-designed, effective programs. And we can put money and effort into activities that really matter and support the mission, but we certainly need to choose those with precision, given the resources that exist. And we think that through these programs, SVCE can really showcase the unique strengths of not just our organization, but the CCA model more broadly, focused on decarbonization, alignment with municipalities, nimbleness and motivation to innovate, transparency and reinvestment in the community. So in light of resource constraints, however, a key theme that you'll see in this proposal is leverage of SVCE's kind of unique position and the resources, the finite resources that we have. And we believe we can best achieve that leverage really through partnerships and innovation and data, and we'll come back to this a bit later. Okay, so the second part is focused on emissions, our trajectory, looking to see what needs to happen in our community to really achieve deep decarbonization. So SVCE commissioned a service territory-wide emissions inventory with DNVGL, which was presented in detail to the board last summer. Using that inventory and also input from a variety of other sources, we carried out a GHG forecasting and scenario analysis to project what our emissions may look like through the 2030 time period. And those results are shown here in this chart. So on the left side of the chart, there are two historical inventory years, 2015, our baseline year, and then also 2017, the first year of our operations. And then 2018 onward is, of course, the forecast. The dotted black line shows the results for the baseline, or business as usual case, using a variety of parameters and assumptions that, where possible, are specific to our county. And this is the forecast that we think will happen without SVCE programs. So the orange-colored cone shows what we're calling kind of the confidence interval. And so this is the result of the scenario analysis. Any type of analysis like this necessarily involves just several parameters that can have a range of input. And so this is the result of varying those different parameters to see kind of what the outcome may be. And so certainly one takeaway with any model like this, there is a lot of uncertainty in what our emissions are going to be over this period of time. So this next chart shows the same stacked bars and also the same dotted black line, the same business as usual. However, we've added a green dashed line. And so this is our projected emissions with the proposed program's portfolio and approach. Excuse me, similar to the prior graph, we've also included a confidence interval from the scenario analysis. And so we use this analysis not only to assess program impacts or portfolio impacts to guide portfolio development, but also specifically to identify proposed GHG targets for 2025 and 2030. And so what you'll see on this chart, this is the same chart, but there are two additions. There are two green diamonds, which are the proposed targets for 2025 and 2030. And as Girish has already covered, these targets are ambitious. They're ambitious, but based on our analysis, we believe that they can be achieved. So our modeling was carried out through 2030, but of course we're on a much longer trajectory. So this chart shows the same business as usual forecast and our proposed emissions targets, but the horizontal axis is extended to 2050. And so the statewide target for 2050 is shown on this chart as well. And as you can see, we have really a long way to go. These emission targets puts us on a trajectory to achieve a 2050 goal, but the amount of change required to achieve it is really large. So to put it in perspective, even if we removed all gasoline vehicles from the road and replaced them with EVs or other modes of transportation like biking and walking, we still would not reach this target. We would still need to reduce natural gas emissions by 50%. And so taking into account the number of households that we have in our service territory and the rate of change that would be required, the rate of retrofitting that would be required would be 33 households per day for 20 years straight in order to achieve this level of reduction. So that's really the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing. And so here's kind of a summary of the existing 2021 target and then also the proposed targets for 2025 and 2030. I'll also mention these targets were formulated also taking into account the climate action plans that exist within the community to ensure kind of consistency with them. And we also would not consider these targets kind of a set and forget target. These are targets that we would be evaluating on an annual basis. As is already in the strategic plan, we'll be carrying out a GHG emissions inventory on an annual basis. In tandem with that, we'll be updating this model, revisiting all of the parameters and assumptions, and determining, reassessing kind of feasibility of these targets. That's going to be used not just for evaluation of these targets, but also, of course, refined program portfolio development. Okay, so the third part and final part of the presentation is the proposed strategy and roadmap. The overarching strategy to achieve deep decarbonization, for society to achieve deep decarbonization, is really summarized in 3 steps. Decarbonize electricity, electrify everything, cars and buildings being the big areas, and then do that while harnessing energy efficiency and grid integration. And so this strategy is really the overarching kind of framework in which we're operating, and it's the result of a large body of academic research on how you achieve deep decarbonization. However, we're proposing specific SVCE strategies, 10 in particular, along with corresponding implementation steps. And so those are included in the packet in the Decarb Strategy and Programs Roadmap. But I'd like to jump into specifically implementation steps that correspond to the Programs Roadmap. Okay, so you should have a 2-page cheat sheet. So first I wanted to cover kind of what's incorporated in this cheat sheet. We realize this is a lot of material to cover. And so we're attempting to try to make it a bit more digestible. So if you open it up, you'll see a table that includes the proposed programs roadmap. And so it's divided by sector. So each horizontal band is corresponds to the different sectors and cross-sector focus areas. On the vertical axis, we have the name of the program, kind of what type of activity it is, what category of activity. We also have a column kind of indicating whether that program is related to a priority area identified by one of the stakeholder groups. We've summarized kind of how we're leveraging based on the proposed program, and then also specifically how those programs stack up with various evaluation criteria and on a qualitative basis. And you'll see that some of the programs are bolded. Those bolded programs are the prioritized ones in the roadmap. And for each of those, there's a page reference. So there's a 3-page program brief in the packet. So if you want to dive deeper into a particular program, that tells you how to get there. Okay. So the first sector is power supply. And the prioritized program area really is developing clean power offerings targeting our C&I customers. And examples of what those types of offerings could include, could be, for instance, rates with a dedicated supply, load following rates, et cetera. But really the goal of that, this program and initiative is to preserve and grow our local market share with these customers and the associated community-wide emissions benefits. So other activities in the power supply sector include retail rates assessment, the update to the integrated resource plan, and also market research on local renewables availability and prices. Okay, so the second sector is the built environment, and the proposed near-term focus really is on new construction. So new construction is the most cost-effective kind of sensible time to electrify. And multiple recent studies have shown even that all electric is either the same, if not cheaper, than natural gas or dual fuel in our area. So the first priority listed here is the REACH code effort to provide support to those member agencies wanting to explore and pursue REACH codes that favor all electric in the jurisdictions. In addition to REACH codes, the second priority area is kind of more education and outreach focused, and that's the all-electric showcase grants, which are to support kind of visible, very visible examples of all-electric modern buildings within our community. The third program focuses on retrofits, and this is one you're already familiar with, the heat pump water heater retrofit program, for which we have an air district grant to pursue. And then also in the roadmap is we have flagged a dedicated, coordinated effort with our member agencies, staff to streamline community-wide electrification. Okay, so one note on this sector, it's been pointed out in numerous board discussions that there are a number of different stakeholder groups that really need to be a part of the discussion in this transformation, including architects, developers, labor, original equipment manufacturers, et cetera. So to supplement kind of local stakeholder engagement in our community, SVCEA is also a member of this group, the Building Decarbonization Group. And it's actually a national group, but their focus, at least on the near term, is really on California. And it's through that group that we're really getting a lot of help engaging in an efficient and productive way with a variety of different stakeholders. Okay. So the third sector is mobility. And the first priority is really laying the groundwork for all activities in this particular sector. And that is working with our member agencies and other stakeholders to identify what are the strategies, what are the priorities, and the action plan that will guide all of our efforts in transportation electrification. The second program highlighted is one that has come up in multiple stakeholder conversations, and that is DC fast charging pilot depots. And that's working with partners on one or more pilots to address specific market barriers, such as facilitating electrification of ride-hailing fleets, as an example. But other activities that are flagged and are part of the roadmap, but not prioritized at this time, include EV incentives for low income, EV charging for multi-unit dwellings, and support for fleet electrification. Okay, so under energy efficiency and grid integration, the prioritized activity here is to pursue a virtual power plant, a virtual micro power plant, if you will. So a VPP, what it is a cloud-based aggregation of customer-sided smart loads. Those smart loads could be storage, they could be smart EV chargers, thermostats, what have you, but the idea is that you can have a company that actually aggregates the response of 1,000 smart EV chargers. And if they take those 1,000 EV chargers and ramp the charging level down, It's effectively equivalent from a market's perspective is taking a power plant and ramping it up. And so that's where the concept or the terminology of a virtual power plant comes from. And it's really an important tool to support managing and harnessing these newly electrified loads resulting in from building and transportation electrification to tackle the duck curve. And so staff research has already begun on this, but will likely also be issuing an RFI and conducting one or more either industry workshops or technical advisory meetings in the development of this important program. Okay, so the fifth sector is education and outreach, and that really the Customer Resource Center is the primary, it's intended to be the primary resource to engage and build awareness with our customers. Not just about SVCE and their power usage more generally, but also specifically about actions that they can take to reduce their emissions, such as related to electrification. And so we know awareness is one of the major barriers to EV adoption, to building electrification efforts. And so it will include a lot of content related to that. And SVC has also already launched community engagement grants specifically to target underrepresented customer segments, and so that's reflected here as well. The sixth and final section is innovation. And so there are two efforts we're pursuing that are very complementary. One of them is what we're calling innovation partners, and that's the identification of key strategic partners that will help us efficiently engage this amazing local ecosystem, local innovation ecosystem in which we exist. And we've identified some partners already and are in the process of putting together a variety of different MOUs and partnership agreements. Complementary to that is a program we're calling Innovation On-Ramp. And so this is a program to support pilot projects. Specifically with external partners on technologies or businesses or ideas that can help accelerate decarbonization. And regarding the key partners for innovation, the two that are identified and we've already drafted MOUs for are Prospect Silicon Valley and Joint Venture Silicon Valley. So in your board packet, there are drafts of those MOUs. However, as I mentioned, we're also in conversations with several others. Okay, so this is the proposed programs portfolio on a single slide divided by sector using our Venn diagram. And then also you have the kind of two-page table in the handout. For this first tranche of programs, the budget request, as Girish already covered, is approximately $6 million over a 2-year period, working out to be around 60% of the total projected budget. And so this is just summarizing the resource request. And then one other component of the proposal, which is in the decarb strategy and roadmap, is a proposal for frequency of reporting and review. So in addition to updates in the CEO report on a monthly basis of any kind of major activities related to programs, the proposal is to, on a roughly quarterly basis, provide a more comprehensive report out of what is the status of the implementation of this roadmap. And then in addition to that reporting, there of course needs to be a comprehensive review of the strategy and roadmap, and we think the timing for that could be best done on an annual basis. And so that's the proposal for reporting and review. Okay, so this concludes the presentation. I'll go ahead and put the staff proposal up on the board again. And thank you again for the opportunity to present, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there questions for Amy? Just by way of process, we're going to have questions for Amy or Girish, then we'll open it up to public comment, then we'll bring it back up for discussion, and hopefully some motions at that point. Any questions for Amy or Girish?
Yes.
Yes, Howard.
Thank you for doing this. I'm very happy with what you have, but I am slightly confused, and it's just in the numbers. So we have the state goal, which is all 1990 referenced, and we have our goal, which is 2015 referenced. What is the magic decoder ring that lets me sort of decide how much we've contributed?
Yeah, so the way the decoder ring, if you will, is taking our baseline year and then taking the value of our emissions that year and comparing it to the statewide emissions that year and then scaling it. And so that's how we ended up pursuing this. We don't have we don't have 1990 level emissions for our service territory. Otherwise, that would be a more appropriate way to kind of calculate if we were to apply the statewide goal to our level, kind of what would it work out to be. So this is kind of the best that we can estimate.
I get the methodology, but it was really a numbers question. When we say that we're going to be 50% of 2015, how much is that of 1990 in round figures? Because wouldn't we need to somehow know that to decide if we're doing our fair share? Maybe 50% isn't enough. Maybe 50% is more than we need. I don't know.
Right. So this is assuming kind of it's proportional. I think that's what you're getting. So we're assuming that the reduction that's happening on a statewide level, we're reducing it a proportional amount. I have if you're asking for like the million metric ton values, those are in the...
No, so I think maybe my question got confused, right? Right, the state's got a goal, and we have to contribute to that goal. And I get that we're going to be 50%, and that's of 2015, but is that our fair share? Is that our 50% of the state goal? Is that... There's no way to know. I get there's no way to know precisely, but somehow we have to say 2015 equals this in 2019, or 2019 is this in 2015, and therefore we're falling here on the 2090 goal. I mean, the 1990 goal.
I think Burton would like to say something here.
Somebody can help clarify what I'm saying.
I'd like to kind of ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
So does the state themselves have any idea that if we were to reduce our emissions by X, this is how much we've contributed to their goal to reduce emissions from 1990? Do they have any way of even knowing it, and should we even be using this 1990 number?
So they've carried out a comprehensive emissions inventory for 1990, but I don't believe that's disaggregated kind of on a geographic level. So I don't think, the answer to your question is I don't think that they would be able to at least precisely say. But there are ways that you can estimate it. But this is, I think the question you're asking and what you're getting at, this is kind of assuming that everyone is sharing the pain an equal amount, so to speak.
I don't know if I confused the issue or not. But
I think where we're not communicating is just, Burton's question was my question. It's probably Liz's question. And the answer is, I think, I'm looking at Gresh because he knows how I work. The answer is, from your side, we don't know that number yet, Member Miller. And the question is when we say 50%, have we done more than we need to do to help the state, or less than we need to do to help the state based on their 1990 goal?
We don't know, right? Yeah. We don't know.
Which is fine. I just wanted to convey, you guys may have already figured out some approximation or not, but that is fine.
And if I may just add, hoping to not confuse the issue since we've got the question several times, it's not atypical for agencies. So in few agencies I've worked in, we have a big difficulty with figuring out 1990.
Right.
We don't know what that is. But that's what AB 32 came up with, and SB 32. So those are the laws that came up with it. So pretty much all the studies and analyses and projections that I have seen in the agencies I work for is they pick a year, and I've seen 2005 being a base year, and more recently it's been 2015 has been a base year. That seems to be conventional wisdom. All right, that's the trajectory we're going to start creating our trajectory based on that baseline.
So when we get to 2050, and I think the answer is the state hasn't figured this out, but you know, each county, each region, whatever, we're each going to get, you know, some number of metric tons, you know, some allocation. Is that how we think it's going to work? And then we would know whether we could fit into that.
Yes, so on the electric sector, I know that's done. So in the electric sector, COB has figured out, okay, electric sector has to reduce by 2030, I believe the number is like 42 million metric tons for the state. And then they've allocated that reduction, and the PUC is using that in the IRPs that are submitted to say, okay, all of you have now submitted your IRPs. Is that going to meet CARB's goal by 2030? So there are those budgets that have been, I know it's been done in the electric sector. I don't know if it's been done in the transportation and housing sector.
I'm just, where I'm going to land for the discussion is to talk about how we're leaders, so that's fine.
Terrific.
We're ahead of the state, I believe, and we're ahead on methodology, even if we can't answer every question.
Yes.
But
Liz-
thank you for those hard
Liz,
questions.
then Rob.
So what I was going to do is ask the question, if we look at the charts you have, like for the greenhouse gas emission trajectory, you have a red dashed line, and you've labeled it California 2050 goal, 80% below 1990. So I was going to ask, where did that line come from? How did you determine that line? And then once we know that, I think we can understand better what percentage of the overall goal is.
Mm-hmm. So this is using our 2015 baseline year, which we know our emissions from. The state also carries out an emissions inventory on an annual basis, so we know what the state's emissions are, and we also know what the state's emissions are from 1990. So we back calculated the 1990 levels based on that estimate, and then reduced it by 50%.
So that's where the red line came from.
That's where the red line and both red lines, the
Both
2030 and 2050 California statewide target. And
So Howard, that's where I was going to, is they've established it by their formula, the 1990 level. And we're trying to get to 80% of the 1990 level.
Rob, sorry.
I have all the data that I need, so I'm happy.
Okay, all right.
it's an approximation for sure.
Rob.
I was just going to chime in on the same discussion. If you take, it looks like the 80% is 750,000. You can back calculate that to what the 1990 is, which I came up with 3,700,000 or whatever the number was, and then calculated our target was 47% below that. So I come up with we're 47% on the way to the 80% our target is. Assuming everything on the graph is what we think it is.
Rod.
Well, my understanding of the statewide goals is that they're absolutes, right? They don't take into account population. So we're expected by 2050 to grow an awful lot, particularly here in the Bay Area. So I appreciate the effort to say what part of the solution are we providing, but let's say we displace a lot of people to the Central Valley, and all of a sudden they're commuting in. Whose carbon account is that on, right? We refuse to build the housing here, or we're too slow to build it. There's a carbon penalty paid, and all those people coming in from far, far away. So it can be tricky, I think, to do this, given that the state goal really is on a per state basis. If in my city, my council said, oh, heck no, we're never going to get any new housing built. Who knows what might happen in my city? That might help us toward the absolute goal of not increasing our carbon footprint. And we could do all these decarbonization projects on single-family homes, but honestly, right, maybe a better metric for us to be looking at wouldn't be an absolute, but it'd be on a per head count basis. Have we decreased the average carbon footprint per resident? So I think we have to be thoughtful and maybe take these things into account, even if the state has these rather big goals. But not thinking about it on a per head count basis might cause me not to want to urbanize in my city, and I think that would be a mistake, particularly in the housing crisis we have. Not doing it might cause us to say, I don't want to put more transportation in, that'll just facilitate people moving around the region. Well, I think it would be a mistake for us to conclude that, we don't have to be taking some of these steps. So it's, I mean, I know we've struggled with this at the Air District as well, and I appreciate that we're, looking at it from a different slice. And so that's one point I wanted to make.
Are there any questions for staff in there?
No.
Are there any other questions for staff? Nancy?
Okay, fine.
I'm living up to my new title as being on the audit committee, so. No, I think it's just an astonishing amount of work and very detailed and a lot of good work. And I'm just reconciling, I guess, in my own way, the resources that staff is recommending, which is about $6 million over 2 years, and making sure, just to point out that on the summary tab, yeah, that's exactly the right one. So you've proposed 19 programs. You've illuminated and are proposing 11 of 19 to move forward with in the next 2 years. And I have been able to cross-reference all the ones on the what do you call it? The decoder ring? What did you call this? Here, I forget.
Cheat sheet.
Cheat sheet. And I just wanted to point out for my, I guess, colleagues and for the edification of the public, that there are a couple of typos and things that don't line up quite exactly. And so I just wanted to point those out for the record, that under the built environment, which seems to be very much the focus, and that 3 out of the 4 are recommended to go forward. What you have labeled on the cheat sheet as BE2 on page 115 is actually BE3 on page 115. And what you have listed on the cheat sheet as BE3, the future fit is actually BE2 in the package. So FYI, there's a couple typos there.
Thank you.
And then I believe that you've, under mobility, it used to be it's listed as MO1 on the cheat sheet, and it's EV1 in the package. And secondly, MO2 is EV2 in the package. And then we get down to the 2 that I couldn't align, so I just wanted to call out for the record that, and this is true also in this slide, the resources slide that's being displayed. Under education and outreach, EO2 aligns with what I believe to be GHG emissions inventory update by the amount. So the amounts match, but the name doesn't match. So you're asking for 100K in fiscal year 19, I believe. But it's mentioned, it's not in, I don't know which. So the question for staff would be, which program does the GHG emissions inventory update align to?
Right, and so the community engagement grants, we've included it here because it's an important part of the portfolio, but actually they are already launched. And so approval for that budget has already happened.
Okay.
It's already launched. We're already working on that. And so there is no budget request for that because we've already gotten it. You're right that in the table, and this is explained in the staff report, but not on this slide. In addition to the program's budget request, there is also a request for funding to carry out the annual emissions inventory, which is currently not allocated. So that's added there, and I apologize. I added a note in the staff report to indicate this isn't kind of what really we're calling a program, although it's in the strategy and it's also already in our strategic plan, but this seemed like an appropriate place to actually request budget for it.
Okay.
So I apologize also for the numbering issues as well.
Yeah, no apologies needed. There's a typo on page 139 where it's E02. It should be E02.
Okay.
So people who are searching for E02 would not find it.
Yeah, I think we switched naming strategies midway. And so the actual strategy and roadmap, this one, which incorporates the program's roadmap, those should be consistent with this chart. But now I realize the actual program briefs, which is what you're referring to, those are outdated. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, like I said, it's a lot of work and very detailed, and I know there was a lot of work to get it kind of in a way that we could talk about it without a lot of flipping back and forth. Much appreciated, by the way. And then just to finish up on this part, I believe that, okay, so you explained the fast charge depot. I think I couldn't align. Okay, so it's EV2 or MO2. Where would that be on this resources chart? The fast charge. Okay, never mind. I found it. Okay, I'm good.
Are there any other questions for staff? Now's the time where members of the public are welcome to make comments. I've received 2 speakers cards so far, one from James Talia and one from Steve Schmidt. If anyone else would like to make a comment, I'd invite you to hand a speaker card to Andrea, who's sitting at the end of the front table, and we'll start in order with James. Hello, James, and welcome. It's nice to see you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. James Tilley, resident of Sunnyvale, chair of Carbon Free Silicon Valley, climate advocacy group for San Mateo County and Santa Clara counties. We work with cities and municipal utilities and the CCAs across the counties. And the board is made up of leaders in different cities across both counties. We wanted to express our support and encourage the board to adopt the staff proposal, including the adoption of the additional targets, the roadmap and programs and budget associated with it. We're pleased with the strong, detailed efforts and work of staff and everyone else involved in all the different groups. And I know from having worked on programs at PG&E that it takes a lot of time and effort just to do one program, let alone put together a whole portfolio and get things ready. There are a lot of details still to be sorted out. Our team, Carbon Free Silicon Valley, is very much looking forward to having good clarity on the metrics by which these programs and the overall strategy will be able to be monitored and assessed so that we know we're on track and how to stay on track going forward. But we know that that is part of getting into the details that the staff still has to do and should not hold up approval at this evening of the staff proposal. Another item that the Carbon Free Silicon Valley board wanted to bring up was in tracking emissions and understanding where we are in emissions, that there's still not the inclusion of fugitive emissions. It's of methane, and one might double as a good ballpark for the effects of greenhouse gases of the use of natural gas. So it is hard to know exactly how to factor that in, but just want to mention that that's not included in really most anybody's carbon calculations at this point, but it just emphasizes the importance of what the staff is already planning to do for electrification and the need to move forward as quickly as possible in reducing natural gas use in buildings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Steve Schmidt, followed by Bruce Carney and Mike Balma. If there's anyone else, please get your speaker cards to Andrea.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Steve.
Hello, Steve Schmidt, resident of Los Altos Hills.
My alternate.
Alternate director to Chair Corrigan. I want to speak out in support of this. I hope it's passed tonight. It's been long in coming, but it's going to be wonderful. Having $6 million dedicated to local programs to reduce greenhouse gases is absolutely fantastic. That's why we're here. That's why SVCE was formed. It's critical. If it's passed, I'm going to be doing a happy dance all the way home tonight.
It's a long way home.
It is a long way home. I can do it. So my only suggestion or comment is that to James's point, having metrics for each of these programs is pretty critical. It can be developed going forward, but with so many programs and they're all pretty new, innovative, we don't know which are going to work. We have to monitor them as we go. Pull the plug on the ones that don't work, double down on the ones that do. So those metrics are key. I know PG&E and the other IOUs, when they run programs, they set aside, I think it's 10 or 20% of the budget for the program for what they call M&V, measurement and verification. And that's part of the tracking. So I would strongly encourage the staff to do that. Thanks very much. I hope it passes.
Thank you, Steve. And Bruce, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm Bruce Carney from Mountain View, also a member of the Carbon Free Silicon Valley Board. And I'm also supportive of the proposed programs and strategies. I'd like to talk about measurement as well, but not measurement of the individual programs, rather measurement of the accomplishment of the cities. So if we were to project ourselves into the middle of 2022, you would be receiving a report about 2021 emissions, and this would be your first opportunity to find out whether the goals that you had set had been achieved. What is likely to happen is that some of the communities within the SVCE service territory will have achieved the goals and some will not have. And I'd like you to begin thinking about what consequences non-attainment of the goals have for SVCE as a whole and for the individual cities. Let's imagine that one city's emissions, instead of going down by 2.5% a year, went up over the 6-year period from 2015 to 2021. What's the consequence of that? Does it matter if the reason that that city's emissions went up was that they added 10% new housing? Because I certainly resonate with Director Sinks's comments about the importance of per capita measurement. In fact, I think one of the most important strategic decisions you could make in the coming months and years is to abandon the absolute goals and to focus instead on per capita goals. That gives cities incentives to build housing, to solve our transportation crisis, to solve our housing crisis, to put people near their jobs so that they can easily walk or bike or take a single bus rather than a bus with a transfer or a train to get to their jobs. I think the state can make a sensible argument why absolute goals are appropriate at the state level, but in a region like ours, I just don't think they're appropriate. Rather than being the nighttime resident population as what you do your per capita on, I think it should be the service population, which is the sum of daytime workers and nighttime residents. Typically in measuring greenhouse gas emissions, if someone commutes, say, from Walnut Creek to Sunnyvale, Walnut Creek gets half of the emissions, Sunnyvale gets the other half of the emissions, on the theory that the reason that there's housing in Walnut Creek and jobs in Sunnyvale is because of decisions that each of those cities have made independently. And so for good or for ill, they each should own half of the emissions of that commuter. I have confidence that this board will be able to address these kinds of questions in a timely fashion and then provide staff with the kind of goals that make the most sense for the kind of organization that you are. And I also encourage you to think in advance rather than waiting to find out who did the best job in emissions reduction and who didn't do the good job. Figure out what the consequences are ahead of time so that people know what will happen. And what I would propose is that cities that do a good job reducing per capita emissions should get more program money in the subsequent years. You should not give more program money to the laggards, you should give it to the leaders as a reward for the accomplishment that they have come up with. So those are all my comments for today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. Hi, Mike, and welcome.
Hi. Mike Balma, also Mountain View resident and on the board of Carbon Free Mountain View. And just as Steve said, this is a long time coming. I remember as part of Carbon Free Mountain View working on community choice, and we would talk about the cleaner energy and the cheaper energy. And yes, there would be these programs, and we hope they would come, and it'd be like icing on the cake. Well, the icing tastes pretty good as it's coming right now. So I too celebrate this. It really seems to institutionalize emissions reductions. I mean, just to be talking about these goals, 50% reduction, I wish the rest of the country could be talking about this, I really do. In terms of the specific proposals, I really appreciate the innovation and the leadership, specifically around the REACH goals. There is a lot of new construction here, and so getting that included in a timely manner, that needs to happen in 2019. So that leadership and moving quickly on that is really a great thing for all of the entities here. The other item is in terms of the heat pump program. There's a lot of innovation there by also paying for the service panel upgrade. That's, when I heard that, it's like mind-blowing, because it not only breaks a barrier for the heat pumps, but for potential electrification, and it also can get some of the other contractors involved. I happen to be with a solar contractor, and it's like, gosh, we can actually encourage folks to get heat pumps if they happen to need a service panel as well. And so it really engages a lot of the participants, and I think that's could be a game changer. It's not going to be an easy road. That's very early, and so one thing I would say is that even though you need to have metrics, some of these areas are going to have a long ramp, like the heat pump stuff. Set the expectations realistically, knowing that you're going to have to break down those barriers and build an ecosystem. The other comment is that I really appreciate the collaboration that SVCE has had, particularly with the other CCEs. I was just in a meeting on a task force for San Mateo County with representatives from PCE, and there's definitely collaboration between PCE and SVCE on the REACH codes is one particular example, and on several other. So leveraging the resources is really important. So I'll just close by saying that with these dire predictions that we have and the current devastating impacts, passing these goals and these actions really gives me hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else here who'd like to make a comment tonight? Hi. If you don't mind, just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Brian Mekachuk, and I'm from the city of Monte Sereno, and I'm on the Customer Program Advisory Committee. We had our last meeting today, and it's been a pretty full year. I think that you probably know that it's a fairly passionate group on the Customer Program Advisory Committee. I would ask that I would put my support behind the budget request. I think that there's two big opportunities, one of which that is not really in here, but it may be covered later, is on the pricing, retail pricing, and having that change behavior. And I think the second component that is included is on the virtual power plant and basically energy storage. I think those are two huge opportunities ahead. I'd also like to say that if you look at what's going on in the world right now, over in France and also in Canada, there's carbon taxes. And those things cause huge disruption. And I think that by working proactively through the state and trying through reducing our emissions other than through a carbon tax is a good way to go. Thanks.
It's Brian. Thank you very much. Did I have the name wrong? Oh, good. No. Oh, I think I heard Brian, not France. Okay, so if there's no other public comments, I'm going to bring the conversation back up here for further discussion. And we'll start, how about if I start down here with Tony and we'll work our way around? Does that work for everybody?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just start by thanking the entire staff. I know that Amy and Garish are at the table at the moment, but I know that there are members back there that contributed as well. I was hearing about the panel upgrades being appreciated. John, I first heard that from you. I'm not sure if it was your idea, but I first heard it from you, and I know that much. I'm just overjoyed tonight. I'll definitely be supporting the staff recommendation. There's some things that I think are really worthwhile here and worth pointing out. One is that this is a very broad program. It's touching on many of the key areas, things that are as diverse as new development, as well as looking at getting our direct access friends back into the fold and addressing the important area of electric vehicle charging. It appropriately blends some new unique initiatives of ours, along with partnerships with other CCAs, as well as our private sector and the innovation efforts there. But I think most importantly in the innovation area, it sows some seeds that could really contribute to these long-term goals that we're laying out. This is tough. And even with all this stuff, we're saying, well, even if it all works as it goes to plan, it's not enough. But we're sowing some seeds that could really lead to high payoffs in the future with us reaching our goals. I didn't get everything I wanted here. One thing I'd really like to see, which I hope we can incorporate, is some matching or innovative, that you have the program list that is just not fast-tracked, is the innovative grants for EV charging and multifamily developments, which is a pet project of mine, I have to say, because if you can't charge at home, you're not going to buy an electric car. It seems it's a big barrier. I really appreciated the comments from the public, particularly on the need for monitoring and verification, and we don't need to see that tonight, but I trust the staff will be coming back next year with during the progress reports with some of the talking to us about some of the methods that they'll be doing. And lastly, Mr. Carney, the per capita idea is one that I really like, because I like to point out that our city has saved about 20%. We're using 20% less water now than we were in 2013, and that's during a time where we grew by 10%. And so I appreciate that, and I think that if we can incorporate both per capita measurement as well as absolute measurements in the future, that's the way to do that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Moving around. Nancy, would you like to say anything?
Nice job to the staff, and I think it's, I mean, just focusing on the built environment one, I think it's great that we're looking at the REACH codes and at changing the culture. I think that's very important to lay the groundwork for things that will change, bend the curve over time, and also start people thinking about it. So I really applaud staff for their thoughtful approach and for bringing forward so many programs that we can actually, in some ways, outsource. So it's it's not entirely up to staff to do. I think it's very thoughtful. It engages the community. It engages innovators. So I'm very supportive of it. Thanks for all your hard work.
Howard. Marcia, I'll come back to you if you have any comments. I didn't mean to skip over you. Okay, super. Howard.
Sure. So I am super happy with this. I want to point out a couple things. You started with we had a false start, and I don't really think that we had a false start. I think that it was a question of cart and horse, and everybody wants to jump to programs, and programs without a strategy and an overall roadmap becomes an awkward place to have a discussion. So what I'm most proud of, and where I actually really think that we are leading in the state, is that we now have a decarbonization strategy, and in our strategy is an actual roadmap. And if that doesn't make us the leader in the state, I want to see somebody else's plan. I think this is as fundamental as when we said, we don't need to do 70% renewable, let's go 100% greenhouse gas free. I think the real magic here is that you've given us the strategy and a roadmap, and we have, sure, $6 million for programs. I know there's a lot of people who want programs, and that is good, but that's just the first 2 years. The programs will change over time, but having a strategy and a roadmap is what differentiates us from every other organization that's out there with some set of random programs. So I applaud staff for having vision to give us the big picture and to set, I think, what should become the gold standard in CCAs in California. Let's see their roadmaps. Let's see their decarbonization strategies.
Rod?
Well, you give a politician the microphone.
Should we put the timer on?
Yeah, you should. Absolutely.
Give me some big lights going back.
I just wanted to flip to slide 25, because when we went through this at exec committee, I didn't really get the idea of a virtual power plant. The way I think of this is staff explained it. And, I mean, there are some words here, but demand side management. When you have incremental load coming on in the evening or whatever it is in the middle of a hot day, if you have the ability to, with discretion, permission, turn that down, because you've aggregated a bunch of that, you can actually avoid having to increase that peak demand, right? Not turn on the I was going to say coal-fired plant, but not turn on the gas plant and use the RA and so forth. So I think, yeah, one way to think about this is really aggregation of all these demand management, these clever devices and appliances we've put in. So virtual power plants for me didn't quite, I mean, that got me thinking differently, like we were going to aggregate all the solar on a bunch of rooftops, but it's really more about demand management, right? So I want to make that point. I'm also grateful for this plan. I think the REACH codes will be an interesting first test, let's say, right? I think it could be challenging for us to take these back to our cities, but I think it's worth a try. And like Howard, I mean, to the point that Mr. Carney made about thinking ahead of time how we get our cities to compete, I suppose we could put stocks out here and whipping posts for council members, board members. Shaming.
Starting with Cupertino.
Yeah, yes, actually. But, you know, I like Howard's idea a little better, and that is the idea that we would challenge other CCAs to come up with better programs than this and mark our progress and see if we can maybe get a little competitive. But the most important thing that I would like to do, besides actually doing this, right, and tracking our metrics and so forth, is I hope we figure out how to package this in a legislator-friendly form and take it right up to the Capitol starting the first week in January and tell them why community choice energy with local control is the right way to actually move the state's goals forward. Because we need to better make our case. I think this is a key component of it. So thank you very much. And I'll stop there.
You're next.
Okay, well, I don't want to repeat what Tony and Howard said, but what they said both resonated with me. But and sort of continuing with what Rod was saying, you know, when I step back, and I don't think people are really expecting us to be the leader for solving global warming, right? And in this plan looks like we are the leader, that everybody else in the county should be rallying around our plan because we really focused on sort of doing it ourselves. Obviously, we can't do it ourselves. So the thing that I start thinking about is, well, we need somehow a better communication to get everybody else aligned with us, because there's a lot of people and organizations that are worried about global warming and want to do something about it, and we've just come up with a plan that looks like geez, if everybody gets on board with us, we can actually get somewhere. So that's feeling to me like the next piece of the puzzle is how do we really get everybody else in the county realizing, hey, we're the leaders. And you know, Rod's focusing on, you know, we take a lot of heat from the PUC, you know, CCAs aren't so great and everything. Well, this certainly on the state level shows, yeah, hey, CCAs are doing something, but I think we need to also start in our county and figure out how does everybody realize, hey, rally around us. Everybody's doing their little pieces, and I think people kind of say, oh, well, it's good we have a clean electric company, but we're going way beyond that, and somehow we need to get everybody else thinking that too in order to help make our plan successful.
Margaret. Well, thank you. So thank you to staff for this very well thought out strat plan. I remember when I came on board 18 months ago, this pressure to get programs, get going, a lot of just, anxiousness. And, Girish saying we need to just take a step back, think things through, come up with a plan and a strategy, and here we are, and I think this is, we're much better for it to have more of a strategic process, and so I appreciate that very much. In my mind, since I've been here, I've been trying to figure out how does this all fit together. We have various other entities, our cities. I serve on the Air District with Rod. We all have our own plans. How does this all fit together? And I think the slide that talks about leverage is very, to me, very key, and primarily partnerships. I have a better sense of how our city can partner with SVCE. I'm excited because we recently had a task force, a citizens task force, and they came up with a set of recommendations, but I think there's quite a bit of alignment. I'm excited to say that our city council, a week ago, I think, approved pursuing REACH codes. So I think with Sunnyvale, the two of us, at least two cities, will be moving forward with that. And it's going to be a heavy lift, but I feel like with SVCE behind us, we'll be able to do it. And, our staff felt comfortable, and that really was very gratifying to see. So I'm going to put the challenge out to Cupertino now, again.
We'll see if we build anything, actually. And I agree with Rob about publicizing, maybe, tooting our horn a little more. I've had some residents still question what we do, and, how we should really be about lowering rates and not too sold on the programs idea. Maybe once we start rolling out the programs, people will start to buy into that. But I think we could definitely do more in letting folks know what we're doing. So I hope that we can incorporate that into the plan too. Thank you.
For those of you who are keeping track, that looks like you've got enough support for this to pass. So I'm going to keep sending it on around to Liz.
Thank you. Yes, I think staff did a remarkable job, and in an extraordinarily brief amount of time. I mean, the caliber of knowledge that we've brought together with the staff to look at this strategically is exceptional. And I'm certainly very grateful for being on a board in an area that's willing to take this on. And we have to be unique. I can't imagine anyone else doing this. I think you've received lots of great comments and feedback from the board members tonight, and I agree with all of it. I think the fact that there is a roadmap here, I don't think anybody understood or understands what it's going to take to get us where we need to go. I mean, those diagrams, first time I saw them, third time I've seen them, and I'm still awestruck. But what it is going to take. and we've got to begin. And we couldn't have a better, broader, aggressive range. Try things. If it doesn't work, try something else. But there's a culture that's being established in this roadmap that I think is indicative of where we live. And I think our communities can set the bar at a very, very high level because of this work. So yes, I'm supportive, and thank you very much.
Lisa.
Thank you. As the newbie, when I reviewed the materials and just listening to the presentation, it's very impressive. And just to echo what has already been said, thank you so much for all the work you've done. It is aggressive, it is comprehensive, but I think that's what we need, and I'm excited that we're part of this leader group. I think we got very good feedback from members of the public and also other members up here about, making sure we have metrics and some tracking process to follow these things to ensure that we're staying within the timeline, and so we're able to successfully accomplish these things. With regards to the question that was asked earlier about how does this fit or align with the state goals, I think it sounds aggressive enough that I think we would meet the state goals. So I'm not concerned there, but it would be good to find out how, we're investing all this money, we're investing resources and time. If we meet our own target goals, how does this fit within the state goals? Do we need to be more aggressive? I don't think so, but it would be good to know that as well. But I think this is just wonderful, and I'm excited to be here when it's getting approved. One other question I had, because we all represent different cities here, and someone raised the question about what if one city, the emissions in that city goes up versus another city where it's going down. And I'm just curious, we can have Cupertino, Mountain View, they're obviously already doing the REACH codes. But for the service areas, will we be tracking each city, or are these service target goals for the entire service area? And so we're really not tracking what each city is doing.
So I'd say kind of what we're tracking for public reporting is at a service territory level. However, the emissions inventory, we have resolution at a service territory level. And so, at a city level, a jurisdiction level. And we've provided, for instance, in the last GHG update, kind of information to each individual city on kind of what their composition of the emissions looks like. But as far as in meetings such as this, the tracking is more at the service territory level.
Well, I'm happy to take back to Los Altos that Cupertino, Mountain View, and others have already started. So thank you again.
Would Cupertino and Mountain View like to correct her, just so rumors don't start flying? I'm from Sunnyvale.
Rod, I'm giving you credit because I know you're going to be doing some good work.
I will try very hard, and we'll try very hard if we do get a large project, whether through SB 35 or other means. I will try very hard for our $3 or $4 billion thing to have it be electrified. Yeah.
And you're going to put stocks out.
I mean,
so we can take your name off the whipping plaque first at the top.
That's right.
Terrific. Burton, would you like to say anything?
Sure, I'll finish it up, or I think actually you get to finish it up, but I'd like to finish up by saying thank you very much for a great program. I remember when we first talked about programs, we said, please don't make it refrigerator rebates. And to your credit, these are not refrigerator rebates. This is a blueprint to make a true impact in our environment. And just kind of as an aside, when I mentioned to one of my coworkers that I was going to this meeting and we were going to talk about programs, he said, oh, well, push for lower prices on Wemo. Use your buying power and make it so that our customers can get Wemos and LED lights cheaper. I said, no, I think we're going to go a little bit beyond that. And when I explained it a little bit, he said, wow, I can't believe that there's a government agency that's actually thinking on that level, on that scale, that far out into the future, because most of the time you see just very, very near-term thinking and programs that are being presented. So again, congratulations on this great program. I want to just follow up on what Rob said, that utilizing the talent that you've put together and from the input that we've gotten from the public, it really has shown why Silicon Valley is such a special place. And if we could leverage this plan and get it out into, from an IT perspective, I'll say from the tech perspective, get this thing open source and get it out there, get more eyes on it, get more people working on it, and the plan will just continue to be better. When Alaska had its earthquake, there was a story that was circulating about how when they needed technology to fix one of the major road breaks, they turned to California. And California continues to be the center of innovation in my book. And I think that what you've put together will just continue to solidify that image of us. So again, you've got my wholehearted support on this. I wish we could give you more money, and I'm sure we will be giving you more money after this plan is successful and you show what we can really do with the little bit that we've given you today.
Thank you, Burton. And I think Nancy has one more follow-up thought you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that my comments regarding the built environment, the REACH codes, and the future fit water pump heaters, I want to be clear that Sunnyvale has been working very closely with SVCE, and we want to shout out to staff who worked very hard to help us with a study issue that we just did with members of the community, and we had people lining up who already want the grants to convert their panels, and so that's where my comments came about the culture and using the future fit to switch the culture, but also investing in the built environment changes and the REACH codes as a way to make kind of longer term changes. That came from conversations we had in the public, and we're already getting out there and talking about it, and that is Sunnyvale that is doing that with the help of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And I can see that we have a lot more I'm not going to call it a cheat sheet. I'm going to call it a menu. Okay, can we call it a menu?
I like that.
So I very much support the menu of options that these programs will provide us.
I look forward to Cupertino's.
Yeah. Yes, and you know, like if you tie it to a menu, maybe that.
Okay, hold on. Burton got my eye first, then Rod, and then I'm going to wrap up our comments unless somebody has something of incredible urgency that needs to be added.
Okay, very quickly, one thing I would like to see happen is that these type of programs get promoted very heavily, especially to folks who don't have the means to keep up on the latest technology. It's amazing to see the beautiful houses that are put up in Monte Sereno and all around the Bay Area. They go out and hire the best architects, and I watched one of the executives of a company build his dream house that has cooling. It reminded me of the building that NASA built out at Moffett Field with all of the innovations that they have. But he hired Barry Swinson to actually come in and build this house. He got the best architects, the best energy engineers, and he put together a great team. And these guys were able to go out and find all these programs, and they were able to get money to really help defray some of the cost of building. Most people that are living in just your regular medium income neighborhoods aren't going to have that kind of resources available to them. So if we could really work hard to make sure that everybody knows about this program and not just the people that can already afford it, I think that would be a big win also.
Okay, Rod.
Okay, very briefly, there's a comment made about when we'd first have the results of this. I'm hoping that we don't wait till 2022. I'm hoping that we will be updated on a periodic basis. Does staff anticipate, you know, if we're going to make this work, we're going to have to learn and iterate, modify, and so forth? Yeah. Can you just comment a bit on how you see that cycle progressing and on what timeline?
Sure. So I flipped to slide 31, which is the proposal for kind of the frequency of reporting and review.
So this would be on an annual basis then?
Yes. The proposal at least is to report kind of comprehensively on the entire menu on a quarterly basis.
Quarterly.
And one way to do that is kind of synchronized with these existing cycles that we have, the strategic plan update, budget cycle, et cetera. But to really have a deep dive, comprehensive review on an annual basis with all of the stakeholder groups. But then at a programmatic level, so that's kind of at an entire strategy and roadmap and portfolio level, but at a programmatic level for each individual program, we'd be defining metrics and objectives and timelines for each of those individually. And so those, of course, would be, that would be a part of the report out.
Thank you.
Might I recommend that you use February instead of January to ensure that it's at a timing so that you have all the newly seated board members?
Good comment.
Thank you. That's good. Great suggestion.
Do you have an idea about how, if this group is so, the board here is so willing, that we would make our goals per capita goals as opposed to absolute goals? Maybe this is not the right time, and it's something you'd have to take back and do when we next have this discussion, but just wonder what your thoughts are about that as staff.
Yeah, we will bring that back to you. It is in our plan to consider, but I think there's been enough interest expressed to address that issue in a little broader manner as to how that would
great
impact everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm going to keep my comments incredibly brief for several reasons. Obviously, this thing appears to have unanimous support. Number one. Number two, most of the directors have already made most of the comments I would make. The only one I'm going to drill down to the most minute level to add to the conversation tonight is under the concept of education in strategy 3.2, create a speakers bureau, which I mentioned earlier in the meeting. I want to also encourage us to be prepared or be at the ready to provide help for future generations by having speakers available to go into the classrooms. I've had both of my students this last couple of months, one in high school and one in middle school, come home with discussions that are very relevant to SVCE and the work we're doing. And I want to make sure that if our goals are really looking at 2030 and 2050, there's no time like the present to start talking to these students about what we're doing and how they can be part of the solution in their own and part of their own future. The last thing I'm going to say, just one more time, I'd like to reiterate how incredibly proud I am of being part of this organization and this report, the work that went into it, the depth, the directors and the public comments that were made tonight. This is a room full of people who are really all committed to the same thing, and it could not be more exciting to be sitting here with you all. So with that, I'd like a motion and a second. And
move to adopt the resolution.
Hold on one second.
Yes, I was just going to mention.
Not quite that fast.
The next step is to adopt the resolution. I have one small change to make to the resolution I had drafted, just to be a little clearer on the form of the agreements. And that is section 4 on page 2 of attachment 1. And it refers to the form of agreements being approved. I would just add after the words, the form of agreements, it would say for the implementation of the SVCE decarbonization programs approved by section 2 above. It just better clarifies what these agreements are for.
Are you okay with us making one motion and adopting the entire program package, or do you need each one of these MOUs adopted individually?
No. So the way this is set up here is we just need to adopt resolution number 2018-20, and that will take care of all the actions that you need to take tonight.
I'll amend my motion to adopt the resolution with Greg's amendments.
2018. And I have a motion and a second. I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. All right. While as much as we'd like to sit here and celebrate that, we have another agenda item, number 5, SVCE 2019 electric rates. I think, Girish, are you going to lead this, and then Dawn? Or we'll start right with Dawn.
All right, thank you, Chair Corrigan, and good evening, directors. Very tough act to follow, I must admit, especially with a topic like rates. But I'm going to provide a brief update in terms of where we are with respect to rate setting for 2019. As Poonam mentioned in her comments, we've recently had a delay, actually very similar to one that we had last year. Under the ordinary calendar of events, with PG&E rate making beginning in June, you start to get a preliminary feel for what rates for the following year are going to look like, and then you get incrementally more detailed information as the year progresses. And then by December 31st, we get the very detailed information we need to set our rates. And our usual, well, our going-in plan would be that we do that in January and then publish rates effective February 1st. Similar to last year, we've had a delay. This just happened late last week. The PG&E filings didn't come in on schedule. The ERA is going to be reviewed at a January meeting now, and it's anticipated that we'll have the details that we need for our rate making at the end of February. So the schedule we're going to be on is we'll look at rates in detail at the March board meeting instead of the January board meeting. So we're pushed out a couple of months. That said, I will take just a couple of minutes here to talk about where we are, because we do know a fair amount about what's coming next year. You could bring up the chart, Andrea. So in our budget for this year, our operating budget for this year, we've anticipated that we're going to have to make some significant rate reductions next year. And this is because of two things. It's because the PCIA is going up substantially as a result of the PCIA proceeding and that decision. And we're also going to see a decrease in PG&E rates, generation rates. So the combination of those two things together, it's an additive problem. And we're seeing, or at least our estimates in September, were that rates from PG&E were going to go down by about 8% on average, and that the PCIA was going to go up on average across the board by about 24%. The net effect of that is just to remain competitive with PG&E, meaning going back to our 1% discount to PG&E, we will have to reduce our rates by about 12% from where we are this year. So a pretty significant haircut to our to what we're going to be able to contribute to reserves. So what's in the operating budget right now is the assumption that with those reductions, we'll be reducing our contribution to reserves from approximately $50 million this year to $30 million next year. So we're still doing okay, but not nearly where we were before. I'm still working on bringing that up. Take your time. As of the last couple of months, we have gotten some additional information, and what we're seeing is that the anticipated rate reduction from PG&E for generation rates is going to be a little less than we thought. So that's a movement in a positive direction for us. So we're currently anticipating about 6 or 6.5% reduction versus an 8% reduction that we were thinking before. PCIA, on the other hand, is going in the other direction. It seems to be trending a little higher than we thought. The net effect is we're about where we thought we would be in September at this point. So we're still tracking in the direction of what we anticipate will be moving to a 1% discount relative to PG&E. And that, again, that's from a 6% discount that we have in place this year. So we're still competitive. We're back to where we were in 2017 with that rate differential. Do we have the chart up?
If we could please pull up the chart on the screens, please. There you go.
I know it's confusing to hear about things going up and down, but what we tried to show here, the two bars on the left side show where we are in 2018. So you can see the 6% differential in our effective rate, PCIA, plus our generation rate versus PG&E's generation rate. Next year, we anticipate that PG&E's generation rate is going to come down, and that the PCIA is going to go up, net effect being that we'll have to make a significant reduction in our generation rate. So we'll come back to this chart in March when we have the detailed numbers. We'll also be looking at what this means across all of our rate categories. That's residential, that's small commercial, large commercial, and so forth. And there will be some differences across those rate classes in terms of how these these rate changes play out. But the plan is to have everyone coming in at about a 1% discount relative to PG&E next year. So that's where we are right now. Again, more to come. Lots of details will be presented on this in the March timeframe.
Thank you, Don. Does anybody have questions for Don? Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment on this issue? Do you need us to take any action here? I don't think so. This is just a report out, and we'll look for more information after the new year when PG&E starts rolling out its PCIA and rate information, I guess.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion up here? All right, let's move on. The executive committee report. I'm going to just share with you that the executive committee met last week on December 4th and discussed the decarbonization plan and programs roadmap, received a strategic plan update from staff, and discussed an increased approval limit for the CEO. A special meeting was also held to discuss the outlook and rate setting process for SVCE's 2019 electric rates. The next meeting is scheduled for January following the appointment of the 2019 committee. The next item on the agenda, are there any questions about that? Good. Who's next? Finance, I think, is next. Burton, do you have a report?
No, we're on Christmas break right now.
Fantastic. Fantastic. The Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. Rod, do you have a report?
Well, I would say we're in hoc. On November 30th, the Ad Hoc Committee discussed legislative strategies and priorities with our newly retained SVCE lobbyist, Jennifer Tannehill of Sacramento-based Aaron Reed and Associates. Steve Baker is her senior partner, but he will also be heavily involved with us. Staff proposed legislative priorities after discussion with Cal CCA related to CCA procurement authority, the PCIA, data access, and data transparency. So we discussed these various proposals. We talked about the legislators who might be able to run point on our key priorities in the legislature. We also, on a positive note, noted that a number of cities in Southern California, including San Diego, are making the same choice we made a couple of years ago to move forward to adopt community choice energy. And we expect, while that doesn't seem to be, nothing seems to be getting through to the CPUC in Sacramento on the value we're providing, it certainly should give us more clout in Sacramento. And so we're looking forward to a proactive and more productive year in Sacramento. Yes. Thank you.
Terrific. Item number 9 is the Audit Committee report, also to be delivered by me. The Audit Committee, made up of just myself and Jeannie Bruins, met on December the 5th and was, I think, Director Grilly could not be there that day, but we did meet, and we were joined by Mike Maher of Maher Accountancy and Brett Bradford of Pazenti and Brinker, who joined us by phone. Bradford discussed the plans for the annual audit process and answered committee questions. The committee also received a presentation from staff on the overview of the audit, of the annual IT audit, which was fascinating. I will share with you all. We have additional meetings scheduled in January and February. Any questions about the audit committee? No. Okay, then.
What was fascinating?
Because we're talking about audits. The audit committee is reviewing both the financial audits of the organization as well as doing the IT audits, which includes security, managing our data, but also managing all kinds of other components that go into the smart meter data, that all kinds of things associated with the industry and business that SVCE is in. So it was a fascinating meeting. In fact, I walked away saying, I need this IT team at my house. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Something about Fortnite. I don't know much else about it.
As long as you're not running a private email server, I think.
No, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't even know if I am. Let's just answer it that. We'll let it stand at that. I'm doing my best with these reach goals already. I don't know about email servers. Okay, so are there any board member announcements to make? Anybody? Hi, Nancy, what do you got?
I would like the board members to know that earlier today, I learned that I was appointed to the National League of Cities in Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee.
Fantastic. A good choice.
They seem to think I had qualifications that were appropriate to the position.
Well, I would like to share that as many of you know, our city council meets the night after SVCE, and so I left here supercharged after November, no pun intended, after November's meeting, and went directly to the city of Los Altos Hills and did warn my fellow council members and our staff that I was interested in pursuing REACH codes as part of our annual building update. So those of you who did not believe Los Altos Hills was capable, I just want to assure you we are in the mix. Without any other comments?
You guys are going to beat Cupertino.
If there's no other comments, I'd like to adjourn tonight's meeting and wish everybody the happiest of holidays.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Thanks to your generosity, Marines have delivered Christmas to children in need since 1947.
We don't really have a tradition. It's just like decorating the house, and then on Christmas we open presents. That's really it.
We celebrate Diwali. We celebrate with lights.
We're just here for 2 years. We're from Germany, and we go to Germany every year, and then we go to our grandparents, and we sing songs, and then we pack out the presents.